Hello, I'm Bob the Booker and welcome to my channel, and today I just wanted to talk a bit about some books that I've been reading recently. Booker reading has very much dominated a lot of my other reading, plus I've just had bits of holiday and managed to injure myself slightly, so my reading's been slightly off. I'm fine, I'm just recovering and taking it very easy. So I've not been doing a great deal of other reading outside of Booker stuff, but let's get talking a little bit about these here today. Also, apologies, I am very sweaty because it is still enormously humid here in London, and so I am slightly dying with this, hence the sort of sheen that I've got going over my face. Anyway, enough about that. Let's get started talking a bit about these books. So first up, in my Booker reading, I read another book by Claire Adam, which was her Booker longlisted one, Love Forms. And whilst looking for that in my local library, I saw that they had the audiobook for Golden Child, her first novel. And I realised that I knew nothing about this book, but it had at the time received some sort of love and attention, and it just entirely passed me by at the time. So I thought I'd give it a go just to check it out. It's also set in Trinidad, like Love Forms is, but it has a very, very different story. One that I found really quite interesting for several reasons. So the novel, as the title suggests, with Golden Child, of these two brothers, one of them is very much seen as the favourite. There is more attention lavished on him, and essentially you've got one brother who seems to be doing quite well academically, the other one who is often treated throughout the book as if there is something missing. And there are a few really powerful scenes where they talk about this with him, where he goes through so much of the book being dealt with as if he is there's something fundamentally wrong with him, that he doesn't quite understand how life works like everybody else does. And so the book really focuses on what happens when this one goes missing, and this then means that the book then really focuses around the relationship between the brothers and what you do when the child who is this sort of difficult, odd one is missing, and you have to kind of think about what that means for you as a family. And so much goes into this, and I found this really interesting and just beautifully done in various parts as well. Next up, something very different indeed, A Botanical Daughter by Noah Medlock. And this is a really beautiful book, a kind of fantasy-esque book, as the front cover might suggest, that plays around with these ideas in a really beautiful and moving way, where essentially not quite Little Shop of Horrors, but there is essentially a situation where these two men who are a couple have a child who is essentially made out of plants and various things. So the book goes into it in a lot more detail. I'm giving a very short version of that, but essentially they accidentally start growing a child. She becomes their sort of very real, in many ways, daughter, made out of these plants, sort of growing organically. And they at first watch with sort of more of a scientific interest on her, of sort of what is going on with this, you know, what is going on here? Who is this creature? Will she develop like a regular daughter might for us, like a human daughter might, or will she have something else entirely? But the book just keeps on developing, because there are so many aspects of what it takes to grow her, and particularly the idea of feeding her with potentially a dead person, and how that goes. This is why I was sort of saying about the Little Shop of Horrors thing. But there's something so beautifully tender about the way that's done. I think, you know, from it sounds, you know, the idea sounds a bit more bonkers and sounds like it would lend itself more to comedy. And there are some very funny parts in this book. But also at the same time, I just found this so deeply profound and beautiful, of just the way that these two parents have to now navigate this very strange botanical daughter, and have to think of a way of keeping her safe as well from people who might wish her harm. And it sort of then is this wider story about essentially queer parenting. And it's just, there's so much that goes into this, and is done in a kind of steampunk style at times, which I just found really fun and really beautiful. Like, as in, I say steampunk more because there's a sort of Victorian-ish setting, I think. Yes, a Victorian setting, but obviously with this sort of scientific thing going on with the daughter. There's this thing that feels quite fantastical about it. And I just really loved this. I thought this was so much fun and just so beautiful as well. And last but not least, I read Bleeding Fabulous by Mark Ward. And this is a memoir or non-fiction piece of writing about his life, and particularly some interesting cross-sections of things that I didn't know much about, I have to admit. So he is a haemophiliac, so there is a risk that once he has a cut, it can continuously bleed and it can cause really big issues, which just on the surface of it for many haemophiliacs places them in a lot of sort of situations of risk and vulnerability, where essentially every moment they have to monitor for things that other non-haemophiliacs wouldn't, in terms of, you know, sharp objects or things like that they have to be very careful of. And that's one part of this. But there is a second part of this book that I think really adds some complexity to it in a really interesting way, of a perspective I've not read before. And that is that as part of him being given blood to keep him alive, and you know, he's somebody who will need to receive blood a lot more than the average person because of the haemophilia. He is also part of the scandal that happened many years ago, where it was at the time referred to as the infected blood scandal, and I think some of the naming's changed around it since, where lots of people were given blood from people who had been HIV positive. And this was a sort of time before a lot of the screenings had been done properly and before a lot of other things changed. But there was a specific set of things in this case where essentially that there was a lot more knowledge about it, as in people knew that this was blood that potentially carried that risk, and the proper protocols and things hadn't been done. So there was a whole sort of piece of litigation about this and everything else, which the book goes into as well. So this book then becomes this really interesting story of a man's life, because you've got somebody who is having to be hyper careful of everything going on around him because of the haemophilia. He is a gay man who contracts HIV through blood, but then being an HIV positive gay man means that many people think it has come from sex, and he is then having to sort of articulate with people that there is something here, you know, that about how he's contracted it, and it becomes this whole conversation with partners and so many other things. And then you've got this aspect of this trial and sort of legal challenge as well. But then you've also got what is really joyous in this book as well, of his stories of wanting to become to work in the airline industry, and the real joy he has at that, but actually how various parts of his health conditions, so both the haemophilia and being HIV positive, at various points stand in his way. And so it just ends up being this really beautiful book of just a very joyous exploration of his life through a lens that I had never really stopped and thought a great deal about. Yeah, I just thought this was really beautifully done, and just oddly heartwarming despite the premise of this. You know, it sounds like this is going to be a much darker story, and obviously there are dark moments, but I think it's so beautifully told and so compelling that I really do urge you to check it out as well. So those have been some of the books that I've been reading recently. I hope you are doing really well, and yeah, I hope you're having a good week. And if you're in and around Europe at the moment, I hope you're not melting too badly with the heat that we are having. I realise as a Brit it is my duty to complain about this, but all good otherwise. I hope you're keeping really well. I hope you're having really great books to read, and speak to you very soon. Bye bye.